Hey guys, we are back and we're here today to talk about informative versus opinionated articles. I know that at the beginning of almost every lecture I say this is a really important topic for Unit 1 or Unit 2 or whatever, but I really do believe this is one of the foundational things that I want you to take away from this class, is the difference between an informational or an informative piece versus an opinion or editorial article. It's really crucial, especially in today's media environment where we're seeing things sort of disaggregated more and more from where they used to live, for us to be able to tell the difference between what's information, what's trying to inform us, and what's opinion. So there are two main types of article, and this originates from newspapers. They have informational or informative articles, which strive to be unbiased reportings of facts. That is, they tell us who, what, where, when, and how. And the other major type is opinion articles, which are also called editorials. And those offer persuasive arguments as to how we should feel or what actions we should take about a public controversy. So again, informative articles provide information about an event. They're objective, and their goal is to be neutral. That is, you should not be able to tell whether the person reporting on it approves or disapproves of the events that are happening or the statements that are being made in that article. They're totally different from opinion articles, which are trying to persuade you to take a stance or to take some kind of action on an event. They're written by experts, or they're written by members of the community, and they're written for a particular community. So that's the two main different types of articles that exist right now, these informational or informative, or these opinion articles. As we disaggregate from traditional forms of media, and as articles start to live online, in blogs, as advertisements, the lines start to get a little blurrier. It's a little harder to tell the difference between what's an informational or an informative article and what's an editorial or an opinion or even an advertisement, all of which those three are trying to persuade you to do something. Nonetheless, you can use the rules that we're going to learn to determine either type. So we'll go over those, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll start to feel some mastery about telling the two main types or even three types of articles apart. So here's the tough news. You'll need to read informative articles to learn more about your controversy. There's no way that you can master this controversy that you're engaging in if you don't learn the information in it, right? If you don't get objective, unbiased, and neutral facts about what's going on. But the only type of articles that are appropriate for you to use as sources for your first and your second essays are opinion articles. So you'll need to go above and beyond. You can't just read the bare minimum of 4 articles for essay 1 and say, okay, I'm done, because it's unlikely that you'll just find 4 opinion articles. And even if you do, you may not be well informed enough about what's going on in your controversy to be able to write an effective paper 1. So you're going to have to go above and beyond. You're going to need to read informative articles, but you're also going to need to read opinion articles. And you're going to need to be able to separate out those two to know which is which, because only opinion articles are going to be appropriate in your first and second essays. This is a rhetoric class. What we're interested in is the art of persuasion. So we need to only look at articles where the author is trying to persuade us to do something. So only opinion articles are appropriate for that. Okay, a lot of information on this slide. I know I tend to overpack my slides, but let's talk about it. This is a guide to the differences between informative and opinion articles. So informative articles, as we've said, their purpose is to inform an audience about an event. Their purpose is to answer the questions: who, what, where, when, and how. Maybe you learned those in 5th grade. I learned those in 5th grade. That's what a journalist does, right? Their job is to tell us who did something, what happened, when it happened, where it happened, and how it happened. This next subpoint is really important. Every statement is a statement of fact. It can be measured, it can be tested, it can be verified. That means, proven true by referencing historical or scientific data. Statements of fact can be true or false. They can only be true or false. So I'm recording this. It's July 12th, 2018. The actual temperature outside is about 98 degrees. I could write on a piece of paper the temperature in Austin, Texas on July 12th, 2018 was 32 degrees Fahrenheit at the freezing point. If I wrote that down, that is a statement of fact. It's an untrue statement of fact, but it's a statement of fact. It can be verified, it can be proven true or false by referencing historical or scientific data, or if you happen to be in the room next to me right now here at my office, you could go outside and take a thermometer and you could come back in and you could say, hey, Dr. Ptacek, it is not 32 degrees Fahrenheit outside, it's very warm, right? Or you could refer back to historical data and say, in Austin that day it was actually in the 90s, right? So that's a fact. It's not an opinion. I'm not making a claim and I'm not making an argument. Every statement in an informative article should be a statement of fact. That doesn't mean that every statement is true, but it means that every statement can be verified to be true or false. Okay, another thing that happens in an informative article, everything should be written in the third person. Almost always. It's pretty rare that you see this rule violated. So the pronouns will be he, she, or they. They won't be we or I, first person words. And lastly, in an informative article, one of the big differences, the author doesn't provide their opinion. Again, they're only trying to state the facts, so they stay neutral. You should not be able to tell whether the author approves or disapproves of what they're talking about in this. Okay, turning our attention towards opinion articles, right? So the purpose there is to persuade an audience to take some action or to hold some kind of belief. And generally, they make a call to action. That is, they have kind of a thesis statement that tells us this is what we should do. This is how we should feel about this. This is how you should feel about this. So they're frequently written in the first person. They use the words I or we outside of quotations. And the author includes their opinions alongside facts. That is, some of the statements are verifiable, but some of them are opinions. Some of them are arguments, which by their definition are neither true nor false. They're claims about how we should feel. You'll see verbs like should or must be used a lot in these. We should do this. The president should approve of this law. Our school must fund the band, right? And lastly, in an opinion article, you'll frequently see very positive or very negative language used to describe people, ideas, or events in the article. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, are you feeling pretty good about the difference between informative and opinion articles? Now we're going to talk about some things to watch out for. And this is based on my experience teaching first-year writing in RHE 306 for a decade. Here are a couple places that students tend to hit speed bumps when they're trying to identify the difference between an opinion-based piece and an informative or informational article. So first off, informative articles might quote the opinions of experts or people involved in the events discussed in the article. That is, they might have opinions in them, but those opinions are always going to be in quotation marks. Those opinions are always going to belong to somebody who is not the author of the piece. Don't confuse this with the author speaking in his or her own voice. Those are two separate things, and let's take a look at an example. The first one comes from an informative article that was published on July 1st in the New York Times. Nationwide protests call for an end to migrant family separations. You can see here, I've highlighted a couple places where we see opinions being brought up in this article. And specifically, if we look at that last sentence that's highlighted, right? No human being should be going through what they're going through, Ms. Escobar said. God bless those families. But that's a statement of opinion, right? That's a claim, that's an argument that no human being should be going through what they're going through. But as we can see, that belongs to a particular person in this article, right? That's a quote from someone who was interviewed. That's not the author's statement. We can't tell by reading through this text what the author's feeling about migrant family separations might be. On the other hand, This is from an editorial that was published in the New York Times on this same day. And here, the author, a different author, says, "I don't have a long treatise to issue here, no meandering argument. I am simply outraged beyond my ability to articulate it. This practice of family separation must end, and Trump and every other politician who was silent about it, or worse, endorsed it, must be held to account at the ballot box." Here we can see this is very different, right? This has many of the hallmarks of being an opinion piece. It's in the first person, right? I don't have a long treatise to issue here. I am simply outraged. It uses verbs like should or must, right? This practice of family separation must end, and Trump and every other politician must be held to account at the ballot box, right? This is the author speaking in his own voice in this case. This is not a quotation, right? So this lets us know this is the work of an opinion piece. But again, looking back at this previous one, all the statements of opinion have been put inside quotation marks because this article is an informational article. Okay, another thing to watch out for, part 2. Take a look at the quote on the right-hand side of the screen. This is also from the New York Times. On Tuesday, Ms. Mary Barra, 51, completed a remarkable personal odyssey when she was named as the next chief executive of General Motors and the first woman to ascend to the top job at a major auto company. I know some students who would try to convince me that this is a statement of opinion. And they would say, oh, I see the adjective remarkable. And remarkable is a positive description. So obviously the author must be positively biased or trying to tell us that this is a good thing. That's not true. That's not a successful argument. All authors use adjectives to modify nouns. If we tried to read this sentence without adjectives, it would say, on Tuesday, Ms. Barra, 51, completed an odyssey when she was named as the executive of GM and the woman to ascend to the job at a company. Right? That's crazy. That makes sense, but it doesn't make much sense, right? All authors use adjectives to modify things. Having adjectives present does not mean that the author is secretly biased. Opinions involve personal statements, calls to actions, and strong negative or positive descriptions. So you have to be able to identify a pattern of negative or positive adjectives. If you can find a pattern, then you can see that there's an opinion. Then you can argue that there's bias. One or two adjectives in an entire article is not enough. So don't think that I'll be convinced or that I'll buy it if you try to secretly convince me that an article that you know is an informative article, but it's late in the research game and you're writing your paper and it's due tomorrow. Don't think I'll be convinced because you find one or two adjectives like remarkable. You really have to identify a pattern for it to be an opinionated piece. We're going to see an example of that later. Okay, are you ready to test your knowledge? Head over to the Informative versus Opinion Articles Part 2 video where we'll review some articles together and we'll get some practice on this before you take the quiz. See you there.